Welcome back to Arise Prime Time, where we offer perspectives on the news and talking points of the day. I'm Charles Adeniyi. Now, let's get the perspectives of our guest analysts on the big news and issues of the past 7 days as we look back at the week that was. Hopefully, they'll help us understand better what's going on behind the headlines. And they are Arise News analyst and former chairman of the editorial board of Daily Trust newspaper, Mahmood Jega, and the current affairs analyst and professor of communications at Bayes University, Abuja, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi. As I call them, the original dream team. Thank you very much indeed for being here. Let me start with you, Mahmood Jega. We thought we'd do things a little differently this week by getting you, the analyst, to tell us what stories stood out for you during the week. And I think you both put Nigeria turning 65 this week at the top of your list. Let me start with you, Mahmood Jega. How have you been assessing Nigeria 65 years after independence?
Well, I think as most of the commentators I have seen were saying, it is a mixed bag. It is a mixed bag. There have been a lot of achievements and blessings. Anyone who was old enough to know how Nigeria was in the 1960s, for example, or even earlier, would know that we have acquired a lot more roads and hospitals and schools and housing, even built brand new cities like this, Abuja. A lot of that.
Well, one brand new city.
Well, one brand new.
As well as a lot of hospitals that are not functioning.
Well, that is true. That's the flip side. That's why I said it was a mixed bag. Because part of the problem is that between 1960 and now, our population multiplied 4 times.
True.
So some of these things we built couldn't really match up with the population growth. And then, of course, there is also our very poor maintenance culture. I mean, you don't build a road and leave it like that for 40 years. Or a school. I mean, recently I saw on social media a school. If you see the children packed like sardines.
Or indeed the human body.
Honestly.
Because if you let the human body go, when you don't maintain it, it goes into decrepitude.
It does. And many of our infrastructure, even the recently built ones, are not well maintained. So that's part of the problem. So that's why I said it's a mixed bag.
I think that's a fair assessment. Professor Adeniyi, I wonder what your thoughts were as Nigeria marked 65 years of independence. Is there a sense that the Nigeria project is a much more difficult enterprise now than it was at independence?
No, I don't think so. Nation building is work in progress. And we also know that we have seen nations across the world, they've risen, they've fallen. You know, they've been extinct, and some of them have also been able to steady their gates.
Well, that's no consolation for us, is it?
Well, nations have also been, I mean, we have seen nations move from grass to grass. In our situation, I would say we're just in the middle, somewhat.
Right.
You know, we're just in the middle. We still have some mileage to cover. You know, and of course, we know there are some countries that were once at par with. In the 1960s, when we had our independence, they've gone far ahead of us now.
Well, that suggests regression then, does it?
No, not regression, just that it
a
suggests
slower pace.
Yeah, a slower pace. So we need to hasten our pace, you know, so that not necessarily catching up, but at least to up the ante at the level of meeting the yearnings and aspirations of the people and the dreams of our founding fathers.
Right. One step forward, 2 steps backwards.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, during Obasanjo's time and even Jonathan's time, I mean, the country was streaking ahead and it then seemed to fall back into the rotting vegetation again.
There are so many areas in which we can see merits and demerits, you know, minuses and pluses. And of course, each of those variables can be applicable to any of the administration that we have seen. You know, sometimes we have even seen some military administration come up with some reforms that you otherwise comment now. You know, and we have also seen democratic administration, you know, doing very well too. You know, but of course, there are also some big elephants in the room that we need to be concerned about because they've dug their steps for too long a time.
Right.
You know, for too many years, and we seem not to be paying good attention to them, and they've been like major impediment to our progress. You know, corruption is one of them. You know, we need to deal with this. But for the question of maybe unity, binding us together, that's work in progress. There's no nation that is completely homogeneous, neither is there anyone that is completely heterogeneous, But it's about the mechanism that you put in place to build them. Then, of course, the steps of leaders or the traits of leaders, not to remind citizens of their differences, And what are these measures? And these things are intangibles that we need to be creative on an everyday basis,
Okay.
To put our hands on top of them. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's move on. And Mahmood Jega, another topic that I think you both picked out that you wanted to discuss was the action between Dangote Refinery and the Oil and Gas Workers Association, I think Pengerson, which led to a short-lived strike. What kind of questions did that raise for you?
It was a very troubling thing that happened. We are lucky that it didn't last very long. It would have caused absolute chaos in the country. The kernel of it, from what we hear, was that the Dangote Refinery sacked workers, 800 of them, according to Pengerson, and the refinery said it was doing some reorganization in order to take care of sabotage or something like that. But the union is saying no, all they did was to join the union. Now, it is the right of workers to belong in Nigeria, it is the right of workers to belong to an industrial union. We know that generally managements, especially of private corporations, they don't really like unions. And
unions are a threat.
Yeah, they don't want. But I don't think so.
Troublemakers.
That's the way they see union leaders. In fact, the Dangote people are even saying that the Pengerson is not after the welfare of the workers, it just wants the check-off dues. That is a good argument, because I think even for a corporation, it is good to have union leaders where you can get feedback about what the workers are thinking, and also channel your plans and through the union leaders. It is only when you are very careless with the welfare of the staff, like salaries are not being paid or allowances are not being paid, or there is poor industrial safety. That's usually when you have serious problems with the union leaders.
That is true.
For example, the major telecom companies in Nigeria, they don't seem to be having any problem with their workers, and they have been here for getting to 20 years now. And so it is not impossible to have industrial peace with your workers. And the agreement that was brokered by government appears to be somehow wishy-washy. He said that Dangote Refinery will recall the 800 workers, not to the refinery, but post them to other companies belonging to the... And only yesterday I saw, the Pengerson saying that the agreement didn't work. Actually, they may soon return to the strike. Now, that's unfortunate. So I hope somebody will put his foot down and really reach a conclusive and acceptable agreement.
And for you, Prof, what was your assessment of that Dangote-Pengerson standoff?
Well, I think there's progress yet. There seems to be peace now, sort of, even though it's not a complete kind of peace. But it was a very difficult one for me to take from a group of people working for an organization, a private one at that, an organization that is relatively new, that has been steeped in series of crises, at first with government, and of course, considering how landmark that investment is, how monumental it is, and we're talking about $20 billion here, as somebody with great courage, investing that kind of money in a very difficult sector where government has failed over many years, so that kind of person, to me, I think needs lots of encouragement, not just from government, but of course from the people of this country. And for a set of people to come in the guise of a union, trying to do what looks like a
It
disruption.
doesn't look good, does it?
Yeah, it doesn't really
you
look
know.
good. But again, I'm consoled by the fact that government was able to intervene. You know, that's at the end that we ordinarily desire. Government was able to intervene, and there seems to be some kind of truce now. But I also want to, on the side of the investor as well, I'm sure this is, I mean, a big business person, you know. He's had consequential experiences. He's got mega companies. He must have been dealing with, you know, groups of workers in
for
the
a
past.
long time.
Yeah, there must be a way that he's been able to manage
To
them.
keep
You know,
them
the strategy that he used.
pacified.
Yeah, in those other companies, he can as well use it with his new one, as the case could be. But I think that I also find completely objectionable the kind of adjectives that some of these union leaders were using to describe
Well, you know,
him.
the oil workers union is very powerful in Nigeria.
Very powerful.
And that's probably why, because oil has been the mainstay of this
Yeah,
country. I mean, you don't get the same thing in a sugar refinery or a flour refinery, but they want to kind of throw their weight around and make sure that you're aware of their presence.
Yeah, but it's okay. Let them throw their weight, but it shouldn't be destructive. You know? Sometimes we also talk about criticisms. Criticisms can be very constructive, but when it is destructive, it's not going to be of any good to anyone.
I agree.
And here we're not just talking about criticism, but you are taking action that will disrupt the flow of the company. You know, considering
So it
how
has a
vital,
knock-on effect.
Yeah, considering
for the
how
whole
vital
country.
that product is to the survival of
That's a
the
good
system.
point. Well, let's move on. And you both had your sights set on the international news scene. And Mahmoud, you had your searchlight beamed on the Trump 20-point peace plan for Gaza. And just so you have the latest update, President Trump has given Hamas until 6 p.m. on Sunday to reach an agreement on that plan. He talked about one last chance, and if they don't accept, he says, and these are his words, he'll give the word go for Israel to extinguish their lives.
Imagine. You see, there has never been an American president like this one, who is almost insane. How does a peacemaker give an ultimatum to one side? Ultimatum is for surrender. If you are demanding someone surrenders, then you give him an ultimatum. But if you are negotiating peace, then you have to be patient and listen to all sides.
Course.
And
but to him, he's negotiating a deal.
immediately, what it means.
I mean, you're thinking of it in a much more profound way.
Yeah.
You know, it's a
The
transactional deal. As far as
It's like
he's
saying
concerned.
the U.S. has joined the war, because that's what it amounts to. If you say, you take this or else, what did he say? Hell, that has never seen before. I mean, what happened in Gaza in the last 2 years has not been seen anywhere in the world, probably since the Second World War. It is a major, major human tragedy.
Indeed.
And for an American president to say that even worse than that will come.
Coming.
Well, if the U.S. Army is coming in to do it itself, or as he said, he will back the Israelis, of course, because he's the one who has supplied all the weapons. It is quite unbecoming for the U.S. president to say, I mean, why didn't he give such an ultimatum to Vladimir Putin over Ukraine?
Well, I mean, he respects might.
Exactly.
As far as he's concerned, you can't do that with a
You
country
can't,
that has the
exactly.
biggest number of nuclear weapons in the world.
Yes.
I mean,
he told Putin several times that he should end this war by so you should meet with Zelensky. He didn't do any of that. And there is absolutely nothing you can do. Then you find a wriggling room and say, I'm ready to impose sanctions on Russia, but only if the Western countries stop buying Russian oil. Or say, so he found a way to
wriggle out. Although he does have a point there, because I mean, you can't be talking about sanctions that will work, and then you'll be breaking the sanctions yourself when you're the one who's imposing those sanctions.
Yeah, well, it is because the Western European countries calculate that they cannot do without the Russian oil.
Pragmatism.
Yeah.
But I mean, of course, I'm going to come to you in a minute, Prof. But I mean, I think the frightening thing about this ultimatum is that from all the evidence, the Israelis have entirely surrounded Gaza City, which is the last stronghold. and they're basically waiting for that 6 p.m. deadline, and then they're going to leap on that city from a great height. And the horror that is likely to be unleashed, one doesn't even want to imagine it.
It is true. Although there was an article on CNN yesterday saying that the options are not that straightforward, that the Israeli army already has a manpower problem, and the generals themselves, and they said several times at cabinet meetings,
they wanted
don't
to
do this. Exactly.
Yeah.
The generals and the security chief don't want to go in that direction because their soldiers are exhausted. And finally, such offensive military operation means the death of all the remaining hostages.
Yeah.
And the hostage families...
That's a very good point.
And the hostage families, obviously, their main wish is to have the hostages back.
But I think what is worrying, I've got to move on from here, what is particularly worrying is that Hamas have now said that they will not accept that. From all the sources emerging from that place, there's a split. The Hamas political groups say, okay, they can make compromises and so on, the ones that are in Qatar. But the ones that are in Gaza are making it their last stand and saying that they will not accept this because they will not accept to put their weapons down.
The 20-point peace plan is one-sided. It's basically asking for
Well, they weren't
surrender.
consulted, basically.
Exactly. It's basically asking for surrender. That it says, okay, gradual Israeli withdrawal, but it didn't say what is the timeline. It could stretch on for years. And it made absolutely no mention of the core problem, which is the two-state solution.
And a key element to that is also the element of trust. And that is the fact that the Palestinians do not trust the Israelis. They've broken the agreement several times, and they feel that if they lay down their weapons, these people can just turn around and do whatever they want.
Even when you release the hostages, like Trump is saying, the first point in the plan, release the hostages within two to three. Once Hamas does that, it no longer
That's it, no leverage.
No leverage at all.
Anyway, let's move on, because Prof, you wanted to touch briefly on the synagogue attack in Manchester, England, and some would argue that that's a fallout from what is happening in Gaza.
Yeah, it's going to be, it's a continuing thing. You know, people just want to operate from their own little corner, you know, to revenge, I mean, to do some kind of retaliation over what they feel pained about. And it just tells us that there might not be peace anywhere else if there is perpetual disturbance somewhere else. And of course, it makes us also wonder why we have had, you know, two parties, you know, warring parties, that is, unable to resolve a crisis, you know, still being die-hearted despite all the debt, you know, all their losses, you know, collateral and otherwise. And you just begin to wonder where our humanity is. And if it continues like that, as it appears as it's going to be, going by the exchange we just had with Mahmoud, I'm afraid we'll keep having it, we'll keep witnessing some kind of domino effect like we saw in Manchester. And of course, you know, our ability to have, to live in peace might also be challenged.
Absolutely.
So I think it's a call on the powers that be, the so-called superpowers. Perhaps we are probably in a unipolar world now, to you know, create some kind of moderation, you know, and to allow reason, you know, to prevail. And that's why, again, they shouldn't be too disrespectful of multilateral organizations that are ordinarily elevated above warring parties, including the so-called powerful groups, as the case could be.
Indeed. And Prof, let me ask you this last question, because you had one more topic more than he did that you wanted to talk about. And it was, in fact, given how depressing the conversation we've had so far is, it's a bright spot in an otherwise depressing week, which you wanted to talk about.
Okay, I remember.
And that was President Tinubu unveiling the newly renovated National Theatre in Lagos and renaming it in honor of the Nobel laureate Professor Wole Soyinka.
Yeah, that structure is actually a monument. You know, in the 80s, in the 90s, there were reports, media reports, that it was sinking, all kinds of stories around it. And you wonder, you just remember the role it played in 1977, you know, from the time General Gowon started constructing it up to the time that General Obasanjo, as it then were, you know, commissioned it. And
well, we don't remember. Mahmood and I were not born.
No, come on.
I
understand, you know. A significant role, and of course, a monument like that dilapidating, it reminds you sadly about our poor maintenance culture, and that's why we have to make the call again. That yes, we have renovated it, we have commissioned it, we've named it after an illustrious citizen, an icon. Maintenance is very, very important, you know. That's part of our life, you know. There's a shame, really, with respect to that part of our life, and it needs addressing. Otherwise, irrespective of the renovation, irrespective of the wonderful efforts of the Bankers Committee, and of course, despite the charge the President gave to the committee on what they should continue to do, we'll still have it dilapidating if we do not prioritize maintenance.
Absolutely.
Several examples have been cited across the world, Charles, you know, where your other country, you know, you see structures that are more than 1,000 years old. You know, I keep talking about the Edinburgh Castle, so many structures in England, you know, many thousands of years after, they are still being maintained. So what's wrong with our culture of maintenance, you know, because this thing about renovation will probably not be as costly as it is now if there had been, if we had regular maintenance, you know, over those years.
Well, let me put that to
you. But finally, again,
yeah.
I think, the person after which the structure is named is also well deserved.
Yes, it is. It is. I think everybody would agree with
well
that.
Deserved,
but I mean, let me put that point that he made to you, Mahmood, as the final word. What is wrong with the maintenance culture in this country?
Honestly, since we were very small in this country, we had been hearing leaders saying the problem is our maintenance culture. I don't know where it started, but if I remember, even when we were small kids, you visit, for example, the river basin authorities.
Yes.
You see they have imported large Caterpillar tractors and other, and some small notes will fall out, and then the huge machine will be standing there. Police, the same thing. Military, the same thing. If you visit military engineering, you see a lot of, I think they bought some equipment from Vietnam, Americans abandoned in Vietnam, just parked them there, they are falling apart. So it is everywhere, teaching hospitals everywhere. So I don't know where it started, and I also don't know where it will end.
But I think the challenge there is to have a vocational level of maintenance. You know what I mean? Like we've got to train people who can maintain the society. Everybody can't be, lawyers and doctors and engineers and professors.
I think we have them. It's about attitude.
There's got to be people who can fix things. You see what I mean? And who can create and invent things.
Yeah, but the leaders have to lead the way, because the engineer may even tell you that he filed a report and said this machine needs this.
That is true, and they ignored it.
Exactly.
Okay, on that note, gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Great to see you again. And of course, Mahmood Jega is a Rise News analyst, former chairman of the editorial board of Daily Trust newspaper. And Professor Abiodun Adeniyi is a current affairs analyst and professor of communications at Bayes University, Abuja. Thank you very much indeed. And have a good weekend.
You too.
That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again next week. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, bye-bye, and thank you for watching.